Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to log on, as I know it'll probably take some people with technical issues a couple of minutes, but yeah, we'll get going in 1 or 2 minutes now. And a big welcome to everyone that's logged on already. We're very excited for this conversation, and we hope that you are too. Just if anyone wants to let us know where they are in the world at the moment, as we know this is a very global conversation, you can pop it into the chat box as well. Okay, so I think we'll get going. So say a very good evening or afternoon or morning to everyone, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Abhaile. This is our first ever Returning to Ireland online conference. So my name is Niall Foster. I'm the Policy and Outreach Officer with Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project, which is a specialised service offering support to Irish citizens at all stages of their migration journey. I'd like to thank the support of the Government of Ireland's Immigration Support Programme, which makes our work and this conference possible. So as many of you will know, Abhaile is the Irish for home, a word which holds so much weight and meaning, particularly when viewed through the lens of emigration and return migration. Throughout the week, we have a series of conversations, starting last night with our conversation on the experiences of those who have returned, which is available on our YouTube channel. With the excellent lineup of speakers across the week, we're exploring themes around return migration to Ireland. In this evening's discussion on navigating crisis, we'll hear from our experts in the field as they discuss their work supporting Irish citizens returning to Ireland as a result of crisis. To clarify on that point, as I know this can be a very broad term, so crisis can mean anything from relationship breakdown and a need to return immediately to an evacuation situation as a result of a conflict or civil unrest. So it's really a kind of an unplanned return, or indeed a return where one will find themselves in a crisis on arrival with a lack of support and a risk of homelessness and destitution. So you'll have the opportunity to ask our panel at the end of the discussion any questions you'd like. So please do submit your questions into the Q&A section below. While we may not have time to answer all the questions today, please do feel free to get in touch with us directly with further queries. So tomorrow we'll be hosting our final discussion, just to let you know, of the conference, which is the Rebuilding Your Professional Networks on Return conversation. Following us on social media, you can join the global conversation using the hashtag Abhaile2024, and we'll be sharing recordings of our discussions, so do share these with anyone in your network that might be interested. You can also visit diasporasupport.ie for all of this and for more practical information to support your return on arrival in Ireland. I'm delighted to introduce our panelist speakers now, Karen McHugh, Leslie Alcock, Patrick McDonagh, and our very own Sarah Owen. So starting with Karen. Karen is the Chief Executive of Safe Home Ireland. She's a social worker by profession and has worked in the migrant sector for most of her career, with Irish immigrants in London to immigrants moving to Ireland, and now with Returning Irish. Prior to becoming the CEO of Safe Home in 2016, Karen was the CEO of Durris, a migrant support charity in Limerick, as well as a former director of BIAS, an Irish Centre in London. Karen is passionate about human rights, inclusion, and social justice, and she as a returned immigrant herself, knows firsthand the challenges faced by some Irish abroad, in particular the emotional bond and pull factor to return home once more. So then we have Leslie Alcock, who is the coordinator of the Irish Council for Prisoners Overseas, or in short, the ICPO, and the Immigrant Officer for the Irish Episcopal Council for Immigrants, and the IECE. A native of Carlow, Leslie has an extensive experience working in leadership and casework positions with various social and community services both in Ireland and in the USA. Prior to joining the ICPO and IECE, Leslie was the Executive Director of the Irish Diaspora Centre in Philadelphia, and Leslie has previously served as a board member for the Coalition of Irish Immigration Centres in the United States. Patrick McDonagh is a Deputy Director of the Department of Foreign Affairs Consulate Directorate with responsibility for consular assistance. Prior to taking up his role, Patrick was the Deputy Consul General at the Consulate General of Ireland in Frankfurt, and Patrick was also previously the Department of Foreign Affairs Lead Officer for Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And then we have Sarah Owen, who is our project leader with Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project. A dual Irish and French citizen with a lived experience of emigration, Sarah has resided in Ireland since 2004. She has worked in the area of Irish diaspora support and engagement for 12 years and is passionate about supporting people to make informed migration decisions. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and you're all very welcome. So to kick off the discussion this evening, I'm just going to get a general sense of all of the organizations that we have here with us this evening, just to give people that are listening in an idea of exactly what it is that each organization does. So I guess I'll start with yourself, Patrick. So consular assistance is a hugely important part of the function of embassies and consulates across the globe. But could you give us an idea of what consular actually means in the context of the work of the Department of Foreign Affairs?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just at the outset, just to say huge thanks to Crosscare for organising this conference and for inviting the Department of Foreign Affairs to participate. The relationship that we have with Crosscare is crucial to the provision of consular assistance, and we very much value that close partnership that we have with yourselves. So yeah, what is consular assistance? And we might hear it quite a lot in the media, you know, the Department of Foreign Affairs is providing consular assistance. And I know myself, before joining the department, I was like, what does that actually mean? And there can be quite a lot of big confusion and a lack of awareness as to what actually consular assistance is. So to put it simply, it's practical advice and support that the Department of Foreign Affairs, along with our embassies and consulates overseas, can provide to Irish citizens who find themselves in difficulty overseas. And I suppose those latter points are important, that it is to Irish citizens that we provide consular assistance, and they'll be abroad. Basically, they might be living abroad and have some issues, or they might be traveling for a short period of time on a holiday. So we have a very nice consular assistance charter, which sets out what the department can and cannot do in terms of consular assistance. And we provide consular assistance 24/7. So, you know, if you're abroad, you can get onto your nearest embassy or consulate and request assistance. And that assistance can take, you know, different shapes and forms. So, for example, if an Irish citizen dies abroad, the department here in Dublin and the embassies and consulates abroad can support the family through the repatriation process. So provide information on what steps they need to take. Similarly, if somebody gets sick abroad, they might need to contact the family, they might need to engage with the hospital. So again, your mission abroad can provide guidance and support. If, for example, you lose your passport, you can get onto the consular embassy and they can issue an emergency travel document. And again, if there's a crisis situation, the department will step in as well. There's some things that we can do as well, and while we can do a lot, you know, there is a limit to the assistance that we can provide to our citizens. So we can give legal advice, we can provide financial support, we can give medical advice as well. So yeah, I sort of encourage anyone that maybe wants to know a bit more to go onto the department's website. You can download the Consular Assistance Charter. There's a QR code there as well, which will give you the details of your nearest embassy or consulate overseas. And maybe just to finish, we are seeing actually quite an increase in the number of Irish citizens who are requiring consular assistance. So last year there was a 34% increase. So I think it was over 2,000 individual cases last year. So there is quite a high demand for consular assistance, but you know, it's a priority for the department, and you know, we do our best to support our citizens when they do get into difficulty overseas.
Great. And it is, I suppose, it's one of those terms that you hear time and time again when there is an issue abroad or someone's gotten in trouble abroad, that, you know, consular support is being provided. But yeah, it's probably one of those words that you never really kind of think about too much in depth until you do need it. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that. And Karen, I suppose Safe Home, it does incredible work with helping people return home itself. And I suppose the people, particularly people that find themselves in difficult circumstances abroad with, say, acute needs such as housing. So to give those watching a better understanding, could you give us an idea of the work of Safe Home? You're just on mute.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to reiterate to congratulate you on this great virtual conference, and delighted to be able to be here. And I suppose about Safe Home Ireland, we find we're working very much more in a kind of a crisis zone at the moment. However, the preference to our work is if we can work in a planned way with people who are still abroad, who are thinking of returning home. So that's obviously our priority. It's our priority, I suppose, across the board with every organisation. So Safe Home was set up in the year 2000, and it was initially set up to support qualifying older Irish-born immigrants to return home to social housing schemes around the country. And in the early days, that was, I suppose, a little bit more straightforward and feasible than it is now. It is becoming a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult, be it even, I suppose, the provision of housing, but also, I suppose, the challenges for people to return with, I suppose, a lot more red tape, a lot more bureaucracy. There are a lot more layers involved, even in that planned process. So over the years, the work that we are doing has expanded. So we work, I suppose, now in terms of our outreach service, which is a kind of a unique service that we provide where we can visit people who have returned home, regardless of their situation, be it in a planned or in a crisis or in an emergency situation. We can visit them and meet them in any part of the country. And I suppose it is a little bit like a hand-holding exercise to some extent, where somebody who finds themselves returned, has that, I suppose, unique support wherever they find themselves in the country. And that service, I suppose, is kind of a critical service that we find is now more and more requested, because of the complex nature and because of the challenging situations that people are returning in. So I suppose part of our work is planned, and then the other part, maybe with yourselves, cross referrals, maybe with the consular service, where it is kind of an unplanned and a crisis response. So obviously we have evolved and we are evolving all the time, where we try and work with people before they return in that planned manner, and with the Irish organisations. I'm sure quite a few are here today, so that we can, I suppose, get that message out that we are here. And the key message I would like to get out is that, anybody or an organisation who's watching today, that if there are people who meet the qualifying criteria for Safe Home, which are quite simple, born in Ireland, 57 plus, be able to live independently and not own their own property, that message is out there to people who are, maybe thinking of returning to Ireland, that they can make that contact either with an Irish service abroad or with ourselves directly. But saying that, those who are not, in a position or who have challenging situations, we are available and we are here as well. So it is a partnership approach, I think, and I think we're finding that more and more, that we are all working together when we have those crises or those emergency situations, that we all have, various different particular expertise and skills, but we also have unique areas that we can share that expertise among ourselves as all organisations here today. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And yeah, it's one thing. I know you'd mentioned, getting the word out there, that people, are aware that you guys can assist them in certain situations, because that's something I suppose we always experience as well. As people say to us when they come to us and they get help, I never knew this organization existed. I never knew the help was out there. So the more we can push that and get that word out is better. And I suppose another thing you mentioned around, kind of unique areas, and Sarah, I might go to yourself, because like Safe Home and the ICPO, Crosscare are integral to support of Irish citizens returning home, but particularly those in unplanned crisis situations. Could you give us an idea of the work of Crosscare and maybe the difference between ourselves and our colleagues?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Niall. And yeah, I mean, you said it so well at the beginning. So we're a specialised service offering support to Irish citizens at all stages of their migration, meaning that we don't just work with people who are returning to Ireland, we also support people who are moving abroad or indeed living abroad. We're part of a much larger organisation that's called Crosscare, which is a large social care agency providing services across youth, homelessness, food and other supports in the Greater Dublin region. Now, whilst Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support project was established in 2022, we have actually been around since the 1980s. We were formerly known as Emigrant Advice, and then we fell under the umbrella of Crosscare Migrant Project, our sister project that still currently works with migrants in Ireland. But we split out, created our own new identity since 2022. And we have a new website, which is diasporasupport.ie. There's plenty of information on the work there. But I suppose just to say, together with the colleagues on the call, Consular Services, ICPO, Safe Home, we provide extensive support to Irish citizens returning to Ireland. And because we are Emigrant Support Programme funded, our focus is on people who are in situations where they're marginalised or they're vulnerable for some reason or another, and they need that additional support. So every year we assist over 900 Irish citizens and their family members. And we do this by providing things like pre-departure information if they're going abroad, connecting people who are leaving Ireland with the network of Irish organisations around the world, and then guiding Irish citizens who are returning through their resettlement in Ireland. And again, the particular focus there is on supporting people who are returning in difficult situations. So in terms of how we do that, then it's really a welfare-focused service on return. We're supporting people who are returning potentially with complex needs relating to homelessness, mental or physical health, immigration permissions for non-Irish partners and spouses, possibly advanced age, people being deported, people fleeing violence, whether it's domestic violence or increasingly fleeing conflict zones. And over the years, we've developed specific expertise in particular areas. So social welfare appeals, advocating on behalf of people who've been denied access to their rights and entitlements on return, particularly around the habitual residence condition. In the last 5 to 6 to 7 years, homelessness has been something that we've really developed an expertise in, and advocacy around access to emergency accommodation for people who are arriving back essentially with, maybe a bag of belongings and that's it. The other area that we'd have good expertise in is the Irish immigration system. And again, like I mentioned earlier, that's really around Irish citizens who are returning with non-Irish partners and spouses, and they are going to have to get permission to reside here on the basis of their relationship with their Irish partner or spouse. And then, of course, the big one, crisis returns. So particularly in the last number of years, we've seen returns from conflict zones increasing. Been working very closely with Consular Services there. A very good, strong partnership approach. And in fact, we couldn't do the work that we do without partnerships with everyone who's on the call today, but also more broadly, welfare organisations around the world, Irish consulates, embassies, Irish cultural associations. I mean, Irish people are everywhere. And so we've built these networks of support and we really try and leverage that to be able to, raise awareness that our service exists, but B, also to be able to have channels where we can, I suppose, support a continuation of support for people who are returning in difficult circumstances. As Karen said, it's always better if we're aware of people before they return, but sometimes that's not always possible. And, even a day's heads up can make a huge difference to someone's outcomes, on return. We can do things like we can inform them, give them a little bit of guidance around what they might expect when they return, which often it can be a real shock for them, particularly if they're coming back in a situation where they are going to need to access statutory supports. And again, working in partnership with groups abroad, that can also be very helpful in that regard, because we can get them to have the right documentation and so on. That's not always the case. And I have plenty of stories I could tell of, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday and we get a knock on the door and someone's there with their bag and they've arrived back and they have nowhere to stay. So that is very much a feature of the work, continues to be a feature of the work. But I suppose that might give a bit of a flavour in terms of the differences between ourselves and Safe Home. And I should just say we have a very strong partnership approach. And I suppose the fact that we have unique areas of expertise means that, you know, we lean into those as necessary. So someone who's returning to Dublin might be dealing with ourselves. Someone who's returning outside of Dublin might be dealing directly with Safe Home, but we might support in relation to things like, you know, habitual residents and so on. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, very much so, and I know all about the collaborative nature of that relationship, because I've been ringing up Marianne and Karen on many occasions to pick their brains. So it's and I suppose there is that general theme of we talk about planned and unplanned, and obviously crisis is often seen as unplanned. But Leslie, I suppose the client group that you work with, often, and not in every case, but often it will be that you're aware of the person's coming home for a long period of time, and I guess for people watching, the name is very clear, the Irish citizens that the ICPO supports, but they may not be aware of the depth of the work done by the ICPO in assisting those incarcerated abroad. So would you be able to explain for those who might be not fully aware how the ICPO assists Irish prisoners overseas and maybe their families as well?
Yeah, thanks, Niall. And I'd like to echo Patrick and Karen's sentiments and just thank you for having us, and congratulations on the brilliant conference. And we just, like I said, we value partnership, which has already been kind of mentioned quite a lot. We work very closely with the likes of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Crosscare and Safe Home and other partners who are probably on this call as well, this webinar. But yeah, so the ICPO was established by the Irish Bishops' Conference in 1985. So we're coming up on 40 years. And we work with all Irish people and their families, Irish people in prison overseas and their families at all stages of the imprisonment process. And then also in terms of assisting with their resettlement and post-release. So at the moment, we work with over 1,100 Irish people overseas, with the majority of them being in England and Wales. And we kind of, I suppose, the referral process can be self-referral. If people hear about us, it's through the consulates, through different agencies, through families who will Google, I suppose, Irish person in prison abroad kind of comes up, and we're probably one of the first things. So we will start to work with anybody at any stage. We often, like you'd mentioned about getting the word out there, we often have people who just learn about us midway through their sentence and wish that they'd known about ICPO beforehand, you know. But so yeah, so we, like, I suppose some of the features of being in prison abroad is like the range and length of sentences are so varied. There's an unfamiliar legal system. Language barriers is a huge kind of feature of imprisonment overseas, because even through navigating the language system, but even like navigating through the prison system, where someone can't maybe get a job in prison because they don't understand or don't speak the language. Deportation is also a feature. Extreme hardship as well, like in some prisons, access to food and water and some of those basic necessities is also an issue that arises for some of the people that we support. And then just isolation and lack of that social support. So like the distance from family and the expense to visit for a family member to visit, and the lack of kind of prison visits. So they're just some of the features that we then try to mitigate through the support that we provide in terms of like essentially we provide casework. So we have like a number of caseworkers based in different specialize on different regions. So a caseworker for the United States and Australia, someone else covers Europe, and we have a few caseworkers for England. And a lot of the support we provide is advice and advocacy and information. And we give a lot of like wellness resources and trying to keep well especially in a cell or in a prison kind of environment, fact sheets on different kind of policy areas or issues that they are interested in. And a lot of the casework is really tailored to the needs of the person that we're working with. We have a pen friend scheme as well for some of the people that we work with or our clients. They've no one else to write to or keep in contact and just really want to connect with Ireland and feel, know what's going on. So we have about 40 volunteers who write to different people that we work with around the world. We provide, like, again, in terms of, we do provide some language resources to assist with some of those barriers. We maintain regular contact ourselves with the clients, especially for those who don't have anybody else. And a lot of our work is then liaising with partners such as yourselves and agencies like the Department of Foreign Affairs, the probation officers in prison, social workers and stuff, to make representations on behalf of clients as issues arise. Often, say, with medical care would be a big one, where we would try to kind of, with the Department of Foreign Affairs, try and kind of make a representation to try and help support somebody who might not be getting the medical care that they need. A big piece of our work is providing practical assistance, such as a hardship grant. For a lot of our clients, like just even to help make phone calls, buy some food or stamps to maintain contact with their family, basic toiletries and clothes, different things like that. So that, and we also provide that assistance also to families to try and visit. Like, we see families, and social support is a key and vital, you know, to help somebody through their imprisonment. So we will provide a lot of support to families in that sense as well, to travel and visit their loved one where we can. And then even kind of some of the support with families, a lot of it is that explaining the process when someone initially gets you know, arrested, and just even to explain that they might not be able to make a call for a couple, in some cases a couple of weeks, but even a couple of days, and that you know, and to be fair, like, we would link in a lot with consular services around that, because often they can get information or contact, you know, that the family member or ourselves can't. But even just preparing kind of families for what to expect as much as possible, and we have an online monthly coffee morning where families can get together and just kind of talk through and support each other. And we do get families together in person twice a year with Family Information Day, which is around just that kind of emotional support. And then again, kind of a lot of our focus is supporting family members just in terms of and then also providing practical support and advice on how to make contact with their loved one. But yeah, that's a flavor. I suppose I could go on for ages, but that's essentially kind of an overview of some of the supports that we provide.
There seems to be so many different strands to it as well, and a lot of things that I suppose you'd never even think of, you know, whether it's the person or the family, and like hugely important stuff that, you know, can help people, I suppose, to prepare even for the release and coming home. You know, and I suppose on that thing as well. So you know, we talk about crisis being a very kind of, I suppose, sudden, and you know, people are coming home unplanned, and they haven't got things set up when they come home, and I suppose in some cases you get to work with people for a long time before they return to Ireland. Do you think that makes them any more prepared for the realities of what faces them on return, or does it really matter?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps, especially just even to prepare some for what to expect, or what paperwork, or what even what the situation or the landscape is in Ireland. I mean, a huge part is, I think, an individual's their own circumstances. Like, if returning home is going to be from prison, especially, is going to be challenging no matter what your circumstances, but it kind of often becomes a crisis when if someone has no family support or nowhere to go to in terms of, and then they're coming to, like you know, a lot of your own clients coming back with nowhere to live or stay and no access to finances. And while we will know in advance and try and, like, when we know in advance, we will try and line up, like even working with yourselves on trying to get as much sorted in a short space of time. But so much can't be done before you land here when that's the circumstances of an individual. Where if it is, like, if there's a family support or somewhere to stay, it's still a challenge, and a lot you know, people need a lot of support to navigate through some of that. But having a support system makes such a difference, we find, with our work anyway. Yeah. So, but it is great to be able to kind of help prepare and at least manage expectations for when they're coming home as well. You know what I mean? So, and we do try to do a lot of that as much as we can, so people aren't just shocked and overwhelmed. Well, they'll be overwhelmed regardless, but maybe as overwhelmed, you know.
I suppose that is kind of it's a bit of a feature of crisis returns often is the shock and the, you know, feeling very overwhelmed, both trying to get back and also when you do get back. And I guess, you know, certainly in our work, and I know, you know, we've talked about the rise in consular cases and the work of crisis returns for both Safe Home and for Crosscare. And I suppose in a sense, this is really the rise in global conflicts. And Patrick, just to come back to yourself, I suppose with that rise in global conflicts and with some affecting Irish citizens living abroad, how have these conflicts affected the work of consular, and I suppose these global events changed how you respond to crisis in consular?
Yeah, I suppose that, as I said at the outset, we had about 2,000 individual cases last year, and about 15% of those were crisis related. So we are seeing, yeah, more complex consular cases or crises, and they are more prolonged as well. So, you know, that does place additional pressure on the department. But I suppose we have a framework within the department around how we deal with crises. So, and it's very much a whole of department approach. So, you know, different units of the department will be actively engaged on it. And as I said, depending on the number of citizens involved, you know, we might stand up our crisis centre. So we have a dedicated centre that can be stood up at very short notice. And only in the past few months, we've updated our framework as to how we respond to crisis. So we've done an awful lot of work in recent years around training as well, and training staff on how to respond to particular types of crises, and to ensure that we have, you know, staff that can step in to take on different roles and responsibility. And I suppose because it's so global as well, you know, we would place a lot of emphasis on working with our EU partners and UK partners as well around, you know, practical assistance that we can give to citizens, and also information sharing. And I suppose what we can do in a crisis, again, like, no two crises are the same, but I suppose in the ones that we're kind of dealing with, a lot of it is Irish citizens who need to get out, and they need to get out quite quickly. So one piece of advice I suppose I would give to those listening, or Irish citizens more broadly who are going abroad, is, you know, if you go onto the department's website, there's an awful lot of practical information that you know, can help citizens, you know, before they go abroad, you know, things to kind of bear in mind. But one of the key ones is our citizens registration platform. So that allows citizens to register with a particular embassy or consulate. So we have your details if in the event there is a crisis, you know, we have your contact details, and we're able to engage with you quite rapidly to kind of share latest information and what options might be available at that given time to evacuate citizens. So it's something that, you know, we'd like people to do more often, particularly nowadays, so that we do have that information. We can contact people quite rapidly and share that information with them. And again, I suppose going back to what Leslie and Sarah were saying, you know, a key part of what we would do as well is signposting people. So again, as I was saying, our focus is on people abroad. But obviously we're very conscious that a lot of people might be coming back. You know, they mightn't have a network, they mightn't have any home to go to, you know, all these issues that maybe we might take for granted. So we would signpost people to these organizations. And I think for those at that moment in time, at least knowing that there is somebody that they can at least reach out to and speak to, you know, it's some consolation in the context of a very difficult situation. So like the work that Crosscare do is so vital, I think. And I saw that myself with the recent situation in Gaza, the really, you know, crucial work that Crosscare has done to support people coming back from quite difficult situations. So yeah, so we're constantly evolving, we're constantly looking at our policies and frameworks as to how we do respond to these very tricky and complex cases. But yeah, so people can be assured that we are, you know, we're constantly reviewing it, and we do have a robust system in place to step up and to respond and to support Irish citizens, you know, when they do need that support in the midst of a crisis.
Yeah, and I think my colleague Damien would certainly agree that you know, the relationship that we've built with yourselves and with the ICPO and Safe Home as well in these situations, because it's so important to have that collaborative approach. And I suppose, Sarah, just to come to yourself, because I know you've worked in this area for the last 12 years. Would you say that the landscape of crisis returns has changed, and the relationships between ourselves and, say, Consular or Safe Home, the ICPO, have they become stronger in recent years because of the rise in crisis cases? Or how would you describe that?
I mean, I would say yes, absolutely. I think the fact that as we're all talking, I'm struck by the fact that we keep referring to one another. Like, it really is partnership in its truest sense, you know. And I think that that's grown out of necessity, but also out of the fact that, you know, we all have expertise in particular areas and we complement each other so well. I mean, I know for ourselves in Crosscare, the countries of return of our client group even have changed. I mean, just to give you a bit of a flavor, in 2023, the top 5 countries of return in order for our clients returning to Ireland were the UK, Australia, USA. Okay, maybe not such big surprises there given the numbers of diaspora that we have in those countries. Number 4, though, was Palestine, and that was followed by Libya. So you'll see there in the top 5 countries of people engaging with our service who have returned, 2 of those countries have ongoing conflicts happening. And in the case of Palestine and indeed Gaza, we're working at the moment with over 20 families who have evacuated to Ireland, most with the assistance of the Department of Foreign Affairs, and who have come back. There's about 70 people in total. So it's Irish citizens and their family members. And yeah, they're deeply traumatized. They really need a lot of support to reintegrate. They're terribly resilient, though, and well able to advocate for themselves. But the fact is that we've been there every step of the way to try and help connect them in so far as possible. And what we've seen there has been a really tremendous effort in terms of different government departments working together, really, to try and support these individuals in the best way possible. And I suppose that's something that in my time doing this work, it's the first time really that we've seen this interdepartmental collaboration happen in such a way. And it shows, you know, it really shows. And I think that it was personally, I would really like to see that going forward being something that we adopt as a standard approach, you know. In terms of the growth in crisis returns, absolutely, that's been characterized by obviously Ukraine. We've had Sudan. We now have Gaza. Not to mention, you know, conflict elsewhere in the world, in East Africa and so on. I suppose the other thing that I would say is, in terms of what's changed, we've seen an increase of families presenting in crisis. When I first started doing this work, those presenting in crisis were often individuals who didn't have networks of support. So be it someone who'd been deported back from the USA and was arriving back in Ireland, never even having seen a euro, or indeed someone who'd lived in Asia for a long time and something had gone wrong and arrived back and didn't have any networks of support, possibly because they themselves, when they emigrated Ireland, had left an institution. Now we're seeing families returning who are in very serious need and have complex needs, starting with emergency accommodation, but also complete financial insecurity, particularly people who've left conflict zones. In some cases, if they've returned and they haven't necessarily been engaging with consular services, they've used all the money that they have to get out. And they come back truly with nothing. So that's something that's really changed. There's something else that I would say is that there's unique challenges experienced by people who are returning without networks of support. And we've all sort of referenced this, but a particular group that I'd like to mention are people who are naturalized Irish citizens. So they're Irish citizens by virtue of their residence in Ireland. They've gained Irish citizenship. And then in some ways, they've truly continued their Irish journey by emigrating abroad, you know. And then they find, for whatever reason, they might be returning. And if they're returning in a situation of crisis, very often they don't have those same networks that Irish citizens who've been born and raised here do. And that's something that we've seen significant growth in the last number of years. And with that comes different challenges. So in some cases, it might be that English isn't a first language. So we're adapting constantly as to how we work with people. And the same thing in terms of the complexity of the cases. You know, when I first started this work, the presenting issue tended to be what you were dealing with. But now it's the presenting issue is surrounded by multiple other support needs, whether it's to do with mental ill health or addiction. And then we're doing that, I suppose, within the context of a non-profit sector in Ireland anyway, that's facing challenges post-pandemic with increased demand for social services. So I suppose the landscape definitely has changed, but I would also say that there's opportunities in that, like what I mentioned with the things that work very well around the interdepartmental collaboration on conflict returns, but also learning from COVID. You know, during COVID and during the pandemic, systems of support were put in place very quickly. So we know that that's possible. And it's something I think that we can learn from and take forward. And then the final thing that I'd say is, you know, Ireland is increasingly being looked to as a leader in diaspora engagement. And that's not just, you know, diaspora engagement on the business side of things. It's also to do with diaspora welfare. And I mean, even in the last few months, we received a delegation from Lebanon who wanted to know how we do our work and how the immigrant support program even works, you know. So I think that there's opportunities there, and I think to look forward, there's both those challenges in the landscape that exists, but I think that there's light at the end of the tunnel, if you like.
And I think it's funny because at the Global Irish Civic Forum last year, I even had conversations with people from delegations that were sent there specifically to learn about our diaspora strategy and how we engage with the diaspora. And I think the one thing that we certainly appreciate in Ireland is the groups abroad, the ESP groups that we work with, because often the contacts we have with them are, as you say, the chance to connect with someone before they've made that journey home, particularly people that don't have those support networks. When they get home, we essentially become that support network for them. But to have that contact prior to it, and I suppose I'll just come back to yourself, Karen, because we talked about this, getting the word out and trying to push the message of getting people as prepared as possible. So obviously, you know, most people can plan their journey home, and it's general questions around PPS numbers for partners and things like that. But for others, the need to return can be quite immediate. So I suppose if you were to give advice to an organization abroad working with those in need of a crisis return, what would that be? Sorry, you're just on mute again.
I keep doing that because I'm afraid of my dogs. Yeah, you don't want to hear them. I suppose if they have found an Irish organisation or an organisation abroad, then that is a huge bonus. So what I would say to the organisations, if somebody approaches you thinking of returning, or they need to return very quickly, I think it is important to contact either ourselves or a service in Ireland to, I suppose, make that transition that little bit easier to begin with, to get information, to get advice. I suppose the other critical thing is paper trail. And I think it's critical that as much paperwork as possible, coming back to Ireland without a good paper trail is going to be very challenging. So that I would say, maybe if they have engaged with an Irish organisation, they get a letter from the Irish organisation to say X person was in touch, they're returning this situation, they've lived wherever they've lived for a period of time, and that there is some kind of maybe a trail to confirm that they're leaving that country, whichever it is, for good, because not everyone who's listening today will know about the habitual residence condition. However, it is an aspect of or a key challenge for people returning to prove their connection with Ireland and that they've ceased links elsewhere. And I suppose I would say, with letters, and that could be consular as well, that good support letters change everything. we find that in our work in Safe Home, that when there is some kind of a support letter, you know, our relationships with local authorities right around the country is pretty good. So if we have some kind of good kind of documentation that we can actually at least start a process of engaging. And we've been very fortunate. We've got people I've picked up from airports, and they have been able to get connected into local authorities, but because either the consular service or the organisation abroad gave, I suppose, a good either good information, good advice, and maybe a good letter that helped the case. So I would suggest while the person is with you there, you make the call while they're there, and then we can do that kind of screening assessment over the phone while they're still with you. And then we can maybe advise. Each situation is different, so it's hard to say what advice exactly, but it would be important to make a call or make that contact while the person is with you before they leave the country. That's critical.
Great. And I think that relationship does work both ways as well. So if there is anyone on the call from abroad that's seeing a certain trend of things with Irish people moving that to that particular country that they'd like communicated before they go abroad, we'll do our best on this side to do so. And just to wrap up, and it's a question I'll put to everyone. We talked about, you know, Ireland's diaspora strategy and how other countries are really envious of it. And I suppose now we're in a new stage from 2025 to 2030 of another diaspora strategy. So Patrick, just going to yourself first, I suppose, what do you foresee being the biggest changes for Consular in the next period, or what's coming up for Consular in the next period of the diaspora strategy?
Yeah, I think Sarah kind of touched on it there early on. I suppose when we're looking at the next diaspora strategy, the big thing, I suppose, is the change in demographics of our diaspora. I suppose historically, you know, we have a large Irish diaspora. We have a lot of people as well who claim Irish heritage, and you know, we place a strong emphasis on engaging and supporting our diaspora. Like they're great ambassadors for the country as well. And I suppose we think about our diaspora in the broadest sense, you know, including affinity diaspora as well. But I suppose historically, a lot of our diaspora within the US, UK, Canada, but more recently, you know, they're going to other parts of the world, particularly so it's the Gulf region. And that, I suppose, you know, that dispersed diaspora presents challenges as well, you know, in engaging with them, reaching them. So it is a big priority for our embassies overseas is to engage with the diaspora. So I think from a consular perspective, it's that change in demographics, you know. You find Irish people in all corners of the world, and that can, you know, that's great that they have those opportunities. From the provision of consular assistance, it can present challenges as well. So I suppose it's how we engage with them, how we can provide assistance, what options are available to us. But I know from speaking to colleagues who will be leading on that, you know, key priority for them as well is about youth engagement, in enhancing that engaging with youths, and particularly providing work opportunities for third and fourth generation diaspora. So yeah, I think we have a lot to build on with the current diaspora strategy. But yeah, so there's, like with anything, there will be challenges, but there's also opportunities with the next diaspora strategy as well.
I think that's probably is a real opportunity with the kind of younger diaspora, because, you know, we've always talked about the traditional, you know, people of first, second, third generation, but they'll link in with the Irish clubs and the music groups and the ESP funded groups as well. But I suppose newer generations, or even, you know, older generations of people that have been born to second or third generations in countries, they're probably less likely to engage the way it used to be. So it's yeah, it's a really interesting point on that. Sarah, I suppose I'll go to you next, and what you see as the biggest changes, or what you see coming up for Crosscare in the next period.
Thanks, Niall. And I'm conscious of time. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'll try and keep this brief. But I would say that the conflict returns, unfortunately, it's something that I think is going to be a feature for the foreseeable. And actually what we do there is we're learning on a constant basis as to how to improve our services and make them as inclusive as possible. On that point around inclusion, I think for the diaspora strategy, that's going to be a really important point. Just, you know, really making strides in recognizing the diverse nature of our diaspora, but also meeting them where they're at and building services that have evolved with the multicultural nature of our country. I think that obviously we've seen in recent times rising anti-immigrant sentiment, and there's a risk of an us and them narrative. But I think there's opportunities there to counter that with the fact that migration is really part of the fabric of Ireland. And I think immigrants can use their voice to change that. And then Patrick mentioned this, but just, you know, engaging with younger immigrants who aren't necessarily connected with the traditional immigrant networks of support. They might be getting their information prior to emigrating on TikTok and places like that, and looking at how we really, you know, create meaningful places for engagement, and obviously partnership working to continue. So
I don't think we would have foreseen ourselves on TikTok this time 2 years ago, but here we are. I'll come to yourself next, Karen.
I suppose I'll just kind of throw a bit of a spanner in the works there when you mentioned TikTok. I have to say the online nature of everything now has become a lot more challenging and complex for many people who are returning either in crisis or in vulnerable situations, or who are not IT literate. So everything now, to open a bank account, there are a lot more challenges. To access everything is online. Most people who contact our service, I would say most, are not high digitized or literate people, and it's becoming more and more complex. We have over 300 people on our housing list, and the choice-based lettings, which is an online bidding process, can be quite difficult to somebody who is abroad, who has to apply online for vacancies that may arise. And I suppose I would really reiterate, you know, that we mustn't forget those older Irish, those again who are in prison, those who are street homeless, and those who are in nursing care as well, and survivors, who are that huge chunk of our population who either had to leave Ireland in challenging situations, or who find themselves now with that desire to return home because they, and it is sad to say, but most will, when we answer the phone, we want to come home to die. So I think the online becomes challenging for us at Safe Home. And I wouldn't want to take for granted that everybody will access websites for information, or access TikTok or Twitter or Facebook. And it is something I've constantly raised, that we must not forget those who are either have language or literacy issues as well, you know, with travelers that we work with as well, don't have those resources. So I wouldn't like to see the new diaspora strategy only online. I wouldn't like it to see that it wouldn't include those who are more vulnerable, and those who are second and third generation who want to have those links with Ireland, but because of their means or their nature or their complexities, that they aren't forgotten. So I suppose that would be my point. All our clients are those in greatest needs, and who all will have challenging situations. I suppose the other area that we find increasing interest is around people who are abroad, in either in nursing homes abroad, or they have carers in Ireland. A family member in Ireland may want a carer to return. So I suppose there are large sections of the Irish population who find themselves disenfranchised abroad. So that's something for the diaspora strategy that I suppose is something I will be reiterating going forward. Just the calls that we get. People don't want to be forgotten about because they're not, you know, as literate or as digitized. not just an age thing. And I suppose that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest challenges now in opening a bank account is you even go into the bank and you have to do it online. So we have real issues with some of our clients who return in crisis. We have to go. Unfortunately, our outreach service is lucky that we do go to banks, we do go to social welfare, we do go to appointments with people. So but I'm not convinced everyone will have that opportunity as well. So yeah, that's just raising, I suppose, some of the issues I know that were coming in the questions as well. Yeah, thanks, Niall.
Yeah, no, and a very important point. I think, you know, people just kind of assume that digital literacy is across the board these days, or you just pick up your phone. Whereas I know from my own grandparents, that's definitely not the case, and I often get the call. So, yeah, really important point. And just quickly to come to yourself, Leslie, I suppose what changes would you like to see in the next few years that will make things easier for those in prison when they're returning home?
Yeah, well, further to Karen's point, I mean, whether it can happen or not, it'd be great if there was an ability to apply for some of the services like bank accounts or housing applications before you actually come home. Obviously, for our clients, if they're in prison, they wouldn't be able to access online. So if there is some way of getting ahead of the game or getting the name on the list, you know what I mean? I think it'd be and then just increased investment in the likes of mental health services and housing as well, so that there's easier access to it to our clients who need those additional supports. We deal a lot with the Irish Prison Service around transfer of sentences to Ireland. So the Criminal Justice Act of 2023, while it was a welcome development last year coming into force, we would just in the next couple of years like to see transferring actually be a realistic option for some of our clients who want to finish their sentence in Ireland and be closer to their families. And it's slow kind of happening for inward transfers at the moment. And also like for Irish people in England, when they're released, they're often released on license and have to stay in the UK, where in some cases a lot of people have no support in England, you know, their support network is in Ireland. We would love to see more people being able to resettle in Ireland, and they're just two policy issues that we kind of are advocating a lot with the relevant departments, but we'd love to see more of those opportunities for the people in prison or on license to be able to return home sooner, you know. But I won't have conscious of time, so I won't go into more detail.
No, and thank you for that, and thank you to everyone. And we will move on to the Q&A now. I'll read out a couple of questions that we got in. But yeah, a massive thank you to everyone for taking part, and some really interesting points made. And I suppose points that have brought up a few questions in the chat box. So this question is, if an Irish citizen is returning without financial means or a network in Ireland, will their having lived outside of the country recently affect their access to social housing or other social protection supports?
Can jump in on that if you'd like. So yeah, ultimately the fact that a person has resided abroad and is returning, there are some hurdles that they're going to face. So Karen mentioned this, I mentioned this, but on the social protection side of things, if someone's applying for a means tested payment, they're going to have to also satisfy something called habitual residence condition. And really that's just about showing that the person has moved their centre of interest back to Ireland. If they're an Irish citizen, they've lived here before, and they can show that they're resuming their previous residence in Ireland, they should be able to satisfy that. The issue that we find is that sometimes people aren't aware of this condition until they're told that they haven't qualified for the payment. So that's something we'd really like to see is people being informed as they're putting in their application of what they need to provide to stop a situation where, you know, they've waited 3 months for a decision, then they're refused, then it goes to appeal, and you're looking at 6, 12 months even sometimes before the decision's overturned and they get the thing they should have got in the first place. On the social housing side of things, then really the key point here is to look at local connection. So where is a person's local connection? Where did they previously reside in the country? Where do they have family members living in the country? And that's really the determining factor currently when it comes to access to the social housing list. Now, I will say also social housing lists in Ireland in some places are 12 years long. So the point of getting onto the social housing list, I suppose, is to access supports to do with rental, financial assistance and things like that. But local connection is the key point there. There is a proposal currently being considered to insert habitual residence as part of the requirement if someone is trying to access social housing supports. And in fact, Leslie, Karen and myself are going in and speaking to the Department of Housing about this specifically to raise the unique challenge that this will present for returning Irish immigrants if it is brought in, and advocating for certain changes in terms of solutions that might be considered to address that. So hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah. And I suppose just keeping on the habitual residence, so if someone doesn't satisfy the requirement, would you be returned to the original country you came from, or is it a case that you can then go into an appeals process?
I think that the habitual residence condition creates an awful lot of confusion, and we've seen this time and time again. Like, ultimately, it is really only related to social welfare payments. So if someone applies for a social welfare payment and is refused, they're just not getting the social welfare payment. That's as far as it goes. We'd be hopeful, however, that now that there's increased information out there, available from places like the Citizens Information.ie. There's plenty of information on diasporasupport.ie. There's plenty of information on Safe Home Ireland as well, around habitual residence, that people will be a little bit more informed and know what to provide as part of their application. But again, anyone who's in that situation, who's thinking about returning and thinks they might need to access the statutory supports like social welfare, should definitely get in touch in advance with either ourselves or Safe Home, and indeed both, depending on where they're coming back to.
Great stuff. And I suppose just on that, just to reiterate to everyone that if you do have any further questions, or if you have anything at all you'd like to discuss further on your own personal circumstances, or indeed for anyone that you're working with, we would encourage you to get in touch with us, either using the contact form on diasporasupport.ie or emailing us at irishdiasporasupport@crosscare.ie, or in fact our partners that are joining us today, you can also get in touch with them also on, I'm sure, on their websites, or by contacting them on their phone numbers, which I'm sure will be available on Google, or if anyone needs those contacts, do let us know. So I'd just like to thank all of our attendees today who have joined us from all across the world, and I'd also like to thank our speakers, Karen, Leslie, Patrick and Sarah, for sharing their invaluable insights and also answering your questions and giving us a lot of food for thought. Also, if you have any feedback you'd like to share, we'll be sending you in an email with a link to a short feedback form, and I think it was actually popped into the chat there as well. So do fill that out and let us know how you found the event. And if you'd like to join us again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Irish time, we'll have our Back in Business talk. And just to let you know that a recording of this webinar will be available shortly on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and I wish you a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Slán Abhaile.